Okay guys, Brent Hull, how to think about a house, how to think about the size, the cost, the plans. Do you talk to the builder first, to the architect first? All of those questions. Come join me. Okay guys, so we're getting a lot of calls for designing new houses, and it's a lot of fun. We're really enjoying it. It's all started with those fixes of the houses that I do on the Wednesday video and then on the Friday Instagram post, fixing houses with traditional details. And so we kind of have our lane of traditional design, historic preservation, all that kind of stuff. And so it's been a lot of fun. But one of the questions we get is, well, how much do I spend on a set of plans, and how much do I spend on a house, and just these very basic entry-level questions. So I wanted to answer those today. The first thing we're going to focus on is the house, and so how to think about it, how much it costs, and I just want to give you just the world of home building. You've got production builders, custom builders, and then high-end builders, okay? The production builders are building and selling their houses in that $100 to $150 per square foot range. So if they're building a 2,500 square foot house, it's at that entry-level price of $300,000 to $400,000. So when you see, houses from the 300s or 400s or 500s, you're looking at entry-level houses, most times built by a production builder. There's next a range that if you're, looking in that square footage number, just as a metric for us to think about this, you've got that $150 to $600 a square foot range. So if you're building a 4,000 square foot house, you're building that from 600 to 2.4 million. And the custom builder is the widest variety of builder types, because, and you'll see as I look down here and look at these different things, we'll come back to that in a second, and we'll talk about what's the difference between those things and what's the difference between a production builder and custom builder. Sometimes not much, sometimes quite a bit, so we'll talk about that. Lastly, kind of the high-end builders, and they're building from $500 to $2,000 a square foot, maybe even more. If you're in a place like Aspen or LA or some of these really high-end areas, New York, you're building in that 1,000 to 2,000 square foot range. In some of those ritzy areas, we, just for point of reference, we're building in the 500 to 1,200 a square foot range. And so we're definitely over here in the high end, but it varies based on location, okay? And that's an important thing to remember as we go through this. What is the difference between all these different building types? Essentially the production builders, there's a great quote by Andres Duwani. He says, I'm going to screw this up. There's clients, customers, and victims, okay? And basically the high-end people have clients, custom builders have customers, and the production builders have victims. You don't get a lot, okay? And you are basically buying to a square foot. You sometimes buying like you might buy a car to get the monthly payment figured out as best you can. You might have a few choices in that you might be able to pick one of 3 types of granite countertops. You might be able to choose between crown moldings or carpet. You might have a few of these decisions that you get, but you have very little decisions to make, okay? Very little customization. They are going to fight you tooth and nail that if you have any kind of customization. When you get into this custom range, okay, and we'll talk about that for a second, you get fewer choices to maybe something that's much more flexible, okay? Changes in customization are a pain or a frustration point, and you're going to get from a lot of pushback to a little pushback depending on, which price range you're in. Obviously, the more money you're spending square foot, the more ability you have to make changes and things like that. And then, in the high end, you really have unlimited choices, right? You can do whatever you want. That's kind of the game with our customers. It's just like, yes, let's do that. Let's explore some other options. Hey, here's some flooring ideas. And on that ranch project, we just took flooring samples out to them. We just said, here's great oak floors, here's rustic oak floors. Which do you like? And so more unlimited choices. Production builders too, when you look at that thing, you're talking about a low skill construction, okay? And weak design, okay? So we're kind of going to the victim thing. You don't have the most skilled craftsmen. In fact, I've seen horror stories of some of the framing and some of the other things that are done in some of these jobs. Because we are fighting and shooting for this low cost per square foot, you naturally can't hire the most skilled workers. And so the quality of construction in those jobs isn't the highest. It's probably the lowest, okay? Weak design. The design is going to be also quick and fast. I remember my quote that builders think because their houses sell, they're well designed. They don't want to spend money on design, again, trying to keep this cost down. And so, it's a pretty low skill work area. When you get into custom, you're getting into this mid skill, okay? Some of these low end custom builders are going to have the same framers that are on the production builders jobs. They might just watch them a little more closely. The design goes from weak design, sometimes it's terrible, to okay design. You're really not in that custom range. You're not getting the best design. You're not getting the best details. And then in the high end, you're getting high skill and good to great design. There's still okay design that's happening on the high end, but generally, because of the cost, because of what you're paying, you are getting a very high skilled. That's where most of the craftsmen want to be, because they want to improve their skill. They want to challenge themselves. And so you have a high skill and a good to great design there. And then last thing, just teams, then we'll talk about that a little bit. There's basically no team in the production thing, right? There's your house. I'll tell you when it's done. One guy might be building 15 houses, might be building 10 houses. So there's one guy that is in charge of the whole thing. You might have a salesperson you can talk to, but essentially there is no team there. When you get into the custom area, you've got a small team. You've got a builder, maybe with a project manager. You might have a designer on board. You might have an architect that you may have got the plan started. So there's a growing team, but it's a small team. It's not a huge team. And then when you get into the high-end building, you can end up with some really large teams, because the designer might have 2 or 3 people on her staff. The architect might have a few people that are running that job. The builder has not only a production manager, he might have a superintendent. There's a high level of attention and details. There's a lot of consultants. I was working on a job in Austin. There was 40 consultants. I was the historic preservation consultant on the job. And so there was 3 historic preservation consultants on the job. I was one of them. I was more the builder side of that stuff. So realize that on that high-end side, you have a large team. Now, I bring all of that up because as you think about your house, as you think about what you're going to be building, a lot of times we'll say, they're going to ask us, well, how much does it cost to build a set of plans? And so we'll say, well, tell us about your team. Tell us about who's all involved. Where are you building? If you're in Cross Plains, Texas, going out west from here, it's a small West Texas town. The quality of lumber and quality of trim in the lumber yard isn't very high. You're not going to be getting to get a bunch of high-end products out there. The builders that build out there are used to building kind of in that production and custom level, but it's on the lower end of this construction. So the skill level out there is not going to be very high. And so you are challenged, and so you're going to have to infuse better plans, more details, more specifications to overcome the weak team aspect, the weak builders that are not going to be able to contribute into the quality of the job. If you're building here in Fort Worth or in DFW, that changes things, because you might have a really good builder here. You might have someone who really knows what they're doing, very sophisticated, and doesn't need a lot of direction, doesn't need a lot of plans. And so the plans that we might put together could be half the set, maybe even a third of the set that we might give that client that's out wanting to do a ranch out in a rural area, just because we're going to have to work to make sure we're very clear about specifications, the type of siding, the type of windows, the type of roof, type of rafter tails. We might actually be even encouraging them to bring in material from other areas. As the designer, as the builder, we'd be taking that material out there. But see what I'm doing? If you're thinking about how much a set of plans cost and how much you need to spend, part of that is understanding your team, part of understanding your location, and understanding what you're wanting to build to kind of put that house together. So without answering the question, I'm saying it could be inexpensive, or it could be, you're spending a lot on plans compared to the overall cost because you need it. Now, let's look at the design process. The design process is kind of broken up into a number of things, but realize that if we just look at this area, that the cheapest set of plans, okay, like the builder set when I'm working on fixing those houses on my Wednesday design videos, those are 3 pages, okay? And it's a small set, and they've got all 4 elevations on one page. They've got all the floor plans on another page. They might have a detail and the site plan or something. Really, three pages of plans in order to build that house. That is a small set. I don't think you can build that way, right? That's building on a napkin. The builder set, in my view, has 6 to 20 pages. Realize that the builder set, that 95% of the plans that are out there are going to be either the minimum set or the builder set, right? 98% are going to be in this category, 6 to 20 pages. And so that builder set is going to have, you've got to have the 4 elevations, you've got to have the floor plans, there might be an electrical plan, and then, that gets you to 6, 7 pages, and then those 10 to 14 extra pages are details, are coming up with, what's the roof plan, what the window and door schedule, are there any interior elevations? Most of these sets have no interior elevations, right? And so it's just more time, more money, and so they're just looking at it going, look, if you just want a cheap set of plans, you don't need all that detail. And then when you get into a nice set, typically you're talking about those sets that are built for these high-end projects where I've seen, rolls of plans that are this big around that, have 100 pages in them. Those are rare, okay? On the commercial side, when we're doing preservation projects, those will have big sets of plans. And so, but those are rare. Now, understanding kind of, what you get in a set of plans. The plans that we're giving people are 18 to 30 pages, something like that. So we're kind of dipping down into that nicer set, but we're wanting to give a lot of details. Now, the great thing about historic preservation and traditional details is we don't have to reinvent these design details every time because they're standard, they're historic, they've been time tested and time proven. So the pitch of a windowsill, the trim on the door, all of these different things that might have to be drawn up, we actually have a library and a catalog that we're building, that we're putting together so that we can put together great details. So one of the things I'm always hyping on in my videos, columns the wrong, with no emphasis, doing the tubes, gable end returns messed up, windows messed up. There's 4 or 5 things that if we just got right, it would make our houses a lot better. And that's the way we're thinking about it. We're wanting to give good details. We're wanting to make sure that you're getting what you want. Now, architects and design services, maybe I should say it that way, have kind of 3 ways of pricing, okay? The cheapest, fastest way is you'll hear a number, $1 per square foot. So if you're building a 5,000 square foot house, $1 a foot, $5,000, there's your set of plans, right? Some of these guys are charging $10 or $15 for a set of plans, and 5,000 square feet, that's $75,000, okay? So there's a good range, $5,000 to $75,000 of what you can pay, depending on the detail, depending on the amount of stuff you're putting in. This guy, will, I hope, charging $15 a square foot is really a good designer, right? Hopefully he's doing inventive, fun, creative things that make his plans worth that. If I'm seeing typical builder town things and he's charging $15 a foot, it's a ripoff. It's a waste of money because you want quality in your drawings. The other way of doing it is hourly fee, okay? We'll work on an hourly fee at times just because it's easy and we don't know how much detail people want. But I mean, a cheap hourly fee would be $50 an hour, okay? A higher end hourly fee is $300 an hour. We're at $200 to $250 an hour, okay? Just so you put it in the range. 3 months on the job, 120 hours, a set of plans is $6,000, a set of plans is $36,000, right? So now you're looking at giving you some price range, some numbers to think about. And then the last way is this percentage of construction cost, okay? So on the commercial side, they generally work this way, that these jobs will take 6, 8, 10, 12% of the construction cost. That will be our architectural fees. I know an architect out in California that charges 25% of construction costs. Crazy, right? And so a $2 million house at 6% is $120,000. At 25%, that's $500,000 on the set of plans, right? So $2 million you're spending on your house, 25% of that is going to the architect. So 3 different ways of doing it. Now realize that the process that architects go through is kind of pretty standard. There's what's called schematic design, design development, and then construction documents. Sometimes with the commercial jobs, we'll get into contract administration, where the architect is reviewing pay apps, is reviewing quality of work, and he's the one or she's the one looking over the job to make sure it's all being completed right. Now, on the residential side, I rarely find architects that are doing that construction administration, except maybe on the very high end. Most people, like schematic design is using paper, okay? When I'm doing my Wednesday design videos and those Instagram video things with the thing, that's essentially schematic design. I'm using a pen and tracing paper to come up with new designs and new ways of thinking. So you can think of that as schematic design. Then it's got to be put into CAD. And a lot of our clients on the sketching side are then asking us to put it into CAD. So that's what's called going into design development. Design development is taking these hand drawings and hand details, putting them into CAD so that they can be reproduced more quickly. And then the construction documents are more details, okay, but specifying materials, specifying things so that something can be bid properly and then something can be built properly. So there's kind of a way of thinking about it. So that's the world, right? That's the building world, how to think about it. Maybe you understand now where you fit in that world. But the question is, how much do I spend on a set of plans? It really depends. Realize that you are trying to put together a team. In this production world, you don't have a team. It's just one guy building a house. But when you get into the custom and high-end world, you've got a team, okay? Most likely there's a designer and architect. Most likely there's a builder, and there's you, right? So at the bare minimum, you got 3 people on your team. Are you bringing into your team, are you the one with the design sense? Are you the one that cares the most about the architectural details? If so, then you're going to want a more robust set of plans, more sheets, more details to share with the designer, with the builder, so that they know what to build. A weak team would be if you're the one that's caring about design and you have no one else who's going to help you fight for those quality details. If that's your team, then and a lot of people have to face that's the reality. You need a good set of plans. You need to spend more for a good set of plans because you want to share that information, you want to educate, you want to train them. If you have a robust team, if you have a real sophisticated team with a great architect, a real sophisticated builder, a great interior designer, and all of a sudden your team is 6, 8, 10, 12 people, right, with engineers and everything else, landscapers, then you may not need as robust a thing as long as other people on your team are helping you fight for the details. And that's really the key, is that in today's world, whether you're anywhere in here, you've got to fight for those quality details. You've got to fight for not putting hardy on your house. It sometimes costs a lot more to put hardy on, and it's an ugly product. There's no shadow lines to it. It's a waste of money. And I want people to fight for those quality products that have robust shadow lines, that have historic precedent, that are made to last 100 years and aren't plastic and aren't, fake wood products. A little rant there, but I want you need to have people on your team who are going to help you fight for those quality details. And that robust team, as long as there's people that are helping you fight, you guys might not need 25 pages, you might need 15 pages, because everybody gets it. Everybody understands what molding should be. Everybody understands a sill should be sloped so that it sheds water. All those little things like that. So a quick way I think about it is that if I'm spending $300 to $400 a square foot, I take about 10% of that to think about the cost of the plan. So if I'm building at $300 a square foot, and it's just say it's a number of like a 3,000 square foot house, $30,000 is kind of 10% of that number is kind of where I'm spending. If I'm spending $600 to $800 a square foot, 60 to 80, 10% of that again is your rough cost for what the plan should cost. So hopefully those are some rough numbers. Hopefully it helps you see where you fit in this world. And if you come to us and if you're calling, if you're asking us for plans and you're not really sure how much to charge, we're kind of throwing out the numbers of 30 to 60 to just help people kind of get in the ballpark. But the time it takes to build those details may be maybe longer, maybe less. It's a round number. But 10% of the cost per square foot, good number, good round place to think about it. Hopefully all this gives you a better idea of how the whole thing comes together. We've been getting calls about it, so I wanted to explain it. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.